Hey David, how are you doing?
Hey, Charles, doing well, and yourself?
Well, I'm doing great. It always makes my day whenever I get a catalog from you. I feel that, I have a great numismatic library, but I'm always humbled whenever I see the range of unusual and rare numismatic books that you get in. And I find that I learn so much from reading your catalogs that it awakens me to new possibilities for my own collection, which in turn makes me seek out more books and coins and things. So you've just published your August price list, and I wanted to ask you about a couple of the books you have on offer. But before I get into that, I wanted to know, how do you select pieces for this list as opposed to your traditional numismatic book auction?
Yeah, it's a good question. What I'm looking for, well, first off, I keep these short. It's 36 lots. And I try to have some material that's in ancient coins, some that's in foreign coins, and some that's in U.S. coins. So I'm looking for good, solid books that are attractive and important and cover a wide variety of material so that a 36-lot list can appeal to the widest possible audience.
One of the books that caught my eye, and it has your typical super long Renaissance scholarly title, but the short version is De Esse et Partibus Eius, lot number 8, which you say is the first edition of the very first numismatic book. What numismatic topic does this book cover, and why do we think that this was the first numismatic book?
Well, it's a wonderful title. It's Guillaume Boudet and is the author, and he was one of the main French humanist scholars of the early 16th century. He's considered to be, right up there with Erasmus. And his book is on really what we would call metrology. He was trying to figure out what Roman coins were worth as circulating media. So, you're looking at a bunch of Roman coins in your collection. Well, what could you have bought with these coins back in the day? That was his big question because they had no idea. This is really the dawn of numismatic scholarship, and it got off to a very good start with his book, which is considered to be, from our standards, kind of dense and heavy, but at the same time, its basic ideas have remained sound for some 500 years now. So this was from 1514. It is the very first numismatic book. There are books before that point that have a little bit of numismatic information in them, but this is the first book that's really just devoted to the topic. The area of 16th century and 15th century books has been examined extremely closely by all sorts of people. So the odds of something turning up earlier are negligible, really.
Now, obviously, this book was written in meticulous Latin, so it's going to be a very dense read, even if you're a classic studies major. I see that the title page is illustrated, but are there further illustrations of Roman coins in the text?
It actually does not have illustrations, it's interesting because a little bit afterwards, just a few years later in 1517 came the first illustrated numismatic book, and that book did a lot to put the emphasis of numismatic scholarship on iconography. There was a lot of the earlier books deal with Roman portraiture, and to some extent Greek coins, though Roman ones were understood a little bit better at the time. And as a result, Boudet's work, as important as it was, kind of fell by the wayside just because it wasn't fashionable. But no, to answer your question, there are not coin illustrations in Boudet.
You also have a nice set of Papadopoli on the coins of Venice, which is lot number 26.
And that is also a very rare set of books. That is going to, in some ways, it's going to appeal to a more select crowd on some level, just because it's focused extremely tightly on the coinage of Venice. And we as Americans may think, okay, well, this is a book about the coins of simply one city. How important could that be? But we take a look at this thing, and it's bound in 4 volumes. It has 2,300 pages to it, and so it's absolutely enormous. Has 150 engraved plates of coins. So we learn very, very quickly that the coinage of Venice, has an exceptionally long and rich history. And this was published over more than 20 years, but about 100 years ago, it was starting to wrap up. The final volume came out in 1919, and it's still considered, one of the most important works on the subject. And it's the first complete set that I have offered personally ever. My partner, George Kolbe, has had sets before, but this is the first set that I know of that's been on the market for the past decade or so.
And what do you have as the highlight item for collectors of American numismatic objects?
For American material, we have a really interesting Heath counterfeit detector. It's one of the second editions. It's from 1867, probably. The copyright's 1866. But this was, one of the very first of these to include actual wonderfully printed depictions of counterfeit currency that are printed from the seized plates. So, the Treasury Department would end up with these counterfeit plates, and, Laban Heath, the guy who wrote these books, had an agreement with them that he was allowed to print these to show people what these counterfeits looked like, how good they could be in some cases, and what you had to look for to avoid, taking them. So that's a really nice item that we have, and a lot of the U.S. material is not has already sold. There are a handful of others though.
Again, like I said, one of my favorite aspects of reading your catalogs is the sheer amount of wit that you put into the descriptions. Even sometimes it may be purposefully understated, but if you pay attention, you will see it. I wanted to point out one of my favorite descriptions in this, and that was for Lot 29, the book on Roman Spintrae, where you write, it's a good book to show friends who find numismatics dull. Can you explain to our listeners why that might be the case with this particular volume?
Why that would be the case? Yeah, I've never had the gall to actually depict one of these in one of my catalogs. But basically, these are ancient Roman tokens that are notable because they depict erotic scenes quite graphically. So for a small token, they do a pretty good job of showing a wide variety really of erotic acts. The plates in this book are definitely a little more eyebrow raising than usual.
And I assume that the engraving is a slight bit more elevated than your typical modern coin design?
Well, they're certainly more racy.
All right, David, thanks for calling in and sharing with me some of the backstory behind some of the cool books that you have available now. Obviously, there's one of each, and they go quickly. So if you want to check it out, you can go to numislit.com to learn more. It's always cool to hear from you, David, and good luck with these books. And thank you again for the role you and George play in preserving not only knowledge, but the history of our hobby. What you guys do cannot be easily replicated, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. And, we appreciate your calling.
All right, thanks.